Ooh. Brill. Okay. So yeah, we'll record this session. All being well, fingers crossed, we'll aim to finish by 11. So we usually take about an hour and 30 minutes, but we'll be good by 11 o'clock. I've already covered the questions and I've already covered DISC. So that's that one. Just a quick introduction for me. I've been in around leadership, operational, retail service roles for about 30 odd plus years. The last 20 of years, which has been around specifically looking at the use of psychometric assessments. But only in the last 12 months and my involvement with Chris, have we actually started looking at values. A lot of today is about values in general, definitions, etc. But there is a little bit plugging Interact Global and the fact that we now do have the ability to measure values and put something on them, which is always good because it can be a very subjective topic. And to put some real measure in there is quite useful, especially when you're looking at the benchmarking exercise, which we'll do in a little while. So what are we going to cover this morning? We're going to spend a lot of time looking at values, what they are, how they work, the influence, the necessity to measure them and understand how they work, the relationship between values, emotional intelligence and behaviors, where that actually comes from, a little bit of a case study, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. So hopefully you'll find it an interactive session. But I think the starting point for me is that the last 2 years have been absolutely incredible in terms of changing the commercial world. And you know, I've spoken to several organizations in the last sort of 6 months, and they've got employees that were interviewed, recruited, inducted, running the business, working in the organization, they've got a job in the business, and yet they've never been out of their house. They've never been to the company. They've never interacted socially with their employees, their colleagues, their peers. And that is just, you know, 3 years ago, we would never have dreamt, or I would never have dreamt of that situation happening. So there really has been a shift in the way that we're doing it. And equally, I don't know whether it's the same for you, Tim, down in Australia, but we're really struggling in the recruitment market at the moment in terms of supply and demand.
I don't know. I mean, we've got the lowest unemployment levels that we've had ever. Right. So, but I'm not involved in recruitment, so I don't really know enough.
Okay. Over in the UK, it's definitely it's a situation that I've never seen before. Sarah, you were nodding your head. I mean, I was talking to a recruiter the other day, and he had 2 candidates he'd placed, both of which fell through because their employers just came back and said, "Oh, we'll give you another 10 grand to stay. We can't afford you to go."
We're getting lots of that,
yeah,
more and more this year in terms of counter offers, I would say.
Yeah, it's like I say, we're definitely we've shifted the marketplace now. Whether it's Brexit, whether it's COVID, whether it's whatever it might be, there is a definite shift. So the more robust you can make the recruitment process, the more robust you can make the offer, etc., etc. I think we're needing to do that. So things have definitely changed. I'm going to look at 2 things today in reality. I'm going to look at personal values, what our own values are, where they come from and why we need them, but equally corporate values and what corporate values are. So they help to corporate values help to differentiate a business. They help make us look different to the competition. They determine the organization, what we need to do. They should set clear expectations and rules of behavior that all employees can work towards, collaborate and share. Core values support the company's vision, so there should be a common thread through vision, values, culture, etc., if we can get it right. And they help to foster trust and respect, regardless of status. So that's really what I see as corporate values. A little bit of a quote, this was from a magazine I was reading a while ago, but 50% of CEOs in the UK state that their corporate values drive their business, influence productivity, creativity, and profitability, and give the organisation its value and growth. So, you know, it is a really powerful bit of kit if we can get it right.
What do their employees say? The CEOs are saying, well, 50% of CEOs are saying that, but what about their staff? Are they on the same page?
Well, that was interestingly enough, if we look at overall engagement, it is not that high. So no. The question, Tim, is probably not. But equally, I just want to clarify or rule out what corporate values aren't. They're not a mission statement. They're not a poster on a wall. They're not what others think we should be doing. They're not business strategies, competence and skills, and they're not standalone rules. You know, I go into a lot of organizations and you'll see their value statements put on notice boards, painted on the wall, in the reception, and that's not what they are for me. The values are how you do business or how the organization does business, and it's a lot deeper than just a message on the wall. What they're not. This is what I think they should be. They should be about collaboration and communication. They should be involving staff engagement and motivation. They should be able to allow employees and employers to make better decisions and understand who each others are. They should be a retainer and an attraction for talent. So I was doing some coaching with a chap during lockdown, and during the coaching process, he swapped roles. He moved from one organization to another. For those that you are familiar with this, he was a high SC profile. So he'd done his homework, he'd looked at the company website, he'd looked at their values, their mission statements, and he felt there was a good affinity between his personal values and that of the company. He moved, he lasted literally 3 weeks. And as a coach, I'm saying, okay, yeah, you know, you're 3 weeks in, do you not need to come? And he said, no. He said that what they stated as their values, what I believed was their values, in terms of their business ethics, it's just too big a gap between my values and theirs, and he left. And that's how important values are if you get somebody who really understands and works through them. And it was the business ethics. There was just too much of a discord between what he believed was right and wrong and the organisation was actually delivering. So really, really important to understand your corporate values and equally understand your own personal values, what your drivers are. And my machine stopped working. There we go. This just to differentiate between there is intrinsic and extrinsic. There is a importance in terms of the deep-seated values that people believe that drive your perceptions, your attitudes, almost like a compass steering a ship. That's one of the ways I sort of define values. They will influence your relationships. They will influence the way you buy and purchase things. They will influence the type of job that attracts you, and they will equally influence the type of job that distracts you and you're not moved towards. They lead to your ambitions, etc., 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 and influence the standards and rules that you believe are right for you, and therefore should be reflected in what others do and what the other businesses do as well. I don't know whether you've come across the phrase, but we used to use it a lot in the company I work for. You can have people that are physically present but psychologically disengaged. So they turn up for work every day, but their head isn't in the game. It's not where they want to be. And that is very difficult. You know, you're not going to get the best out of an employee. You're not going to get high levels of engagement with that disconnect in place. So that's the difference between the psychological contract, this is what I want to do, and the employment contract, this is what I have to do. That's where there's a disconnect. A little bit of a mechanical, this slide I put in for when I was working with an engineering business, and they were very technical, so I thought I'd try and match their technical expertise by putting something in. But really what this slide is suggesting is that if you get all your ducks in a row and all the cogs are connected in the right way, so that you get the right people in the right roles with the right behaviours, the right values, the teams will then coincide a lot better and the organisation will function and operate a lot better. And it's not necessarily a top-down process, it's not necessarily a bottom-up process, but it's about getting everything in alignment and getting the right people in the right roles. And it creates an ethos and an atmosphere that just generates success. That's really what I think is important, that the values become aligned with performance. We're going to be talking about recruitment predominantly today, but I'm a real strong believer that any sort of benchmarking exercises, any sort of 360-degree surveys, any sort of engagement surveys should incorporate an element of values into that process. It isn't just about how to do the job or why they do the job, it's what their internal drivers are, and getting that congruence right is really, really important for me. Quick example, this is just one. We use this example an awful lot. Richard Branson, yeah, nobody would say he isn't a successful chap in one way, shape or another, run a variety of businesses, but his mantra that the employees that he takes care in recruiting the right people, he trains them to a standard where they can leave them and where they would want to be headhunted and poached because the opposition would want them on their team, but he treats them in a way that they don't want to leave and they want to stay. Nobody else knocking at the door yet, Saul? Oh, you're muted.
No, nobody knocking at the door. They've all gone out the back gate.
So there's a definition there in terms of personal values. The thing for me, and what makes the job I do now so fascinating and so amazing, is every day is different. I speak to people, I meet people, I interact with people every day, but none of them are the same. They may share common behavioral traits. You know, they may be a high D, they may be a high S, whatever it is. They may have similar levels of intellect. They may be like-minded and share common values. I don't know, audience perhaps not appropriate, but whoever watched the Lionesses football game last night, the semi-finals for the Euros, absolutely phenomenal team ethics that were going on. They won 4-0, but brilliant game. But every single player on that pitch would have had slightly different values and beliefs, but the drive was to a common goal. And that's where I think values starts to make a big difference. So personal values for me, they are personal. No two people will have exactly the same set. But as you'll see in a little while, we do have a way of measuring it across the board, and so that we can put a little bit of emphasis behind it. Okay, model that we use all the time when we're talking about values, beliefs, behaviours. The analogy of an iceberg, common enough, there's about 20% of an iceberg that you actually see. 80% of it's sat under the water. And that's similar with behaviours and values. So Saul and I, Moira, I guess you're the same, we do quite a lot of training in terms of modifying behaviour. Yeah. Modifying behavioral traits, looking at why you might need to behave differently in certain different situations. And behavior can be quite fluid. Behavior is conscious. You know, we're often thinking about how we say something. I'm coaching somebody at the moment around presentation skills, and he's really, really trying to use the right words. And what I'm saying to him is actually, the words aren't that important. It's the tonality and the body language and how you present yourself and what the audience sees that makes a massive difference rather than the actual words you use. But, you know, behavior is very relevant, and it's the what and the how. If anybody's a fan of Simon Sinek, you'll know the what, how and why. And the what and the how is what you see in terms of behavior. There is a transitional line, so not for today, but emotional intelligence sort of sits on that boundary between values and behaviors. Emotional intelligence can be trained, it can be modified, but it's a lot harder to do. And it starts to look more of the intrinsic stuff than the extrinsic stuff. And then under the waterline, this massive 80% of what makes us human beings is the invisible bit. It's your nature nurture. It's what you're been exposed to in terms of environment as a childhood. It's what makes your DNA. It's the culture that you were brought up in. It's the influence of your parents, etc., etc., etc. I've done a few exercises lately, and it's fascinating to see where people sit in the family structure. So are they the youngest son or daughter? Are they the oldest son or daughter? Are they the middle child? It's fascinating, yeah. You know, the middle child. I did a team diagnostic a couple of weeks ago, and there was two of the audience, or two of the group, where they were both had 4 brothers or sisters. So there was 5 children in the family in both situations. One of them was the middle child, and one of them was the eldest child. Different families, but that's that. And they were so different. And they described. I do an exercise in terms of just introductions and starting to understand who you are and why you are, and looking at building trust. So being able to impart personal information, which is why I do it. Just to understand. I don't know if anybody's read the book about Patrick Lencioni, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Really good book. If you haven't, I would recommend it, certainly on my book list. But it's looking at how you can start to build trust when you're building a team, and just by allowing a certain element of personal situations in a safe environment to share is a useful exercise to start that ball rolling. And it was fascinating. You know, the eldest child was definitely showing the signs of being the eldest child. The middle one, real different personality, different values set altogether. And that's the bit under the ground. That's the difference really between behavior and values from today's perspective in terms of looking at recruitment. You know, lots of recruitment processes will have a behavioral profiling model in it, whether it's be Myers-Briggs, Thomas's, Interacts. There's hundreds out there looking at different sorts of behaviors. But the thing with an interview process, and I saw it on Monday, I was doing some work with a company, we were interviewing candidates on Monday. People put on a work mask. People can modify their behavior for the hour's interview, the hour and a half interview, even a half a day of an assessment center. They can appear to be somebody very different. What we need to do is be able to have some way of getting under that skin and understanding the person under the mask. And I think that's, you know, what the real value of assessments can be. Anybody got any questions so far? Everybody reasonably comfortable? Pace good? Not going too quickly, too slowly?
No. Yeah, good.
Okay. This is just covering a lot of what we said. So it's about the balance between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic is because they want to. It's what their values tell them is the right thing. It's what their behaviors, curiosity, expectations, passions, etc. That's what they're being told internally. Their head is saying this is the right thing to do. Extrinsic motivators, things like behaviors, tangible rewards, you know, everybody goes to work because we earn some money. Some earn more than others, you know, but that is an extrinsic motivator that we do. Equally, I was talking to a client the other day and they were saying, you know, we promoted somebody into a management position because they'd been with the business 10 years and we felt it was the right thing to do. All of a sudden they found that person wasn't a manager.
No.
But that person was really good at their job, but they weren't a manager. And it's created, I've got involved now because it's created a whole host of problems that they've got an individual that they actually want to now take out of the business. They've been 10 years working fine, and now they've got an issue. So that's the variation between intrinsic, extrinsic motivators, and the values will influence more around the intrinsic side than the extrinsic. Values should be at the heart of everything we do. So there's a typical sort of employee life cycle. They should drive everything that the organisation does, from strategies right through each stage, from the entry, the initial screening, right through to unfortunately at some point where the exit happens. You know, I said I've been in and around businesses for 30 years. I've had to make people redundant more than once. And you know, you can do that pleasant's probably the wrong word, but you can do it in a nice way. You know, it's about the organisation, it's about the situation, it's not about the individual. So, you know, right through the employee life cycle, if you stand and live by your values, it should work. I've already mentioned values should be included in a 360. It should be part of the review process and the performance management process at some point. And equally, again, with an employee life cycle, everything is changing. We started the presentation about saying, you know, the world is a different place to what it was 2 or 3 years ago. But we need to adapt with that. We need to learn to do things in a slightly different way. And the only thing that from my perspective, with both life and businesses, is it's going to change. You're going to be hit with the unexpected. Things are going to happen that you're not looking at. So however much you plan, at some point you fall back onto these intrinsic, real strong values and beliefs. So that's what keeps you going, and it's what's giving you your compass and your direction. Okay, quick review of the actual model that Interact uses, Interact Global. We have 2 assessments that look at values. One is a personal values profile. It's a questionnaire, takes about 10-15 minutes to complete, and I'll show you the input and output in a little while, but it's all about the individual. And then there's corporate values. Corporate values sits around the similar 7 factors, 21 facets, but there are different ways of creating the corporate value. And this is the benchmark bit of the exercise. In terms of the model, it's a well-established model. I've mentioned earlier, it's only been in the UK for about 12 months, been in South Africa and Australia for a lot longer, about 15, 16 years, I believe. It's got a really robust and strong pedigree, includes concepts such as Maslow's, Hertzberg's, McClelland's three needs theory, real solid pedigree. But with corporate values, there's different ways of looking at it. So you can take the company's existing values model and map it to the Interact model. That's been done on several occasions. You can go through a questionnaire, or the bit I prefer most is using what we call a set of cards, a set of 21 value cards, and you facilitate an exercise whereby members of the organisation play a card game, and they pick randomly their 21 cards and put them in order. Interestingly, I worked with a company several months ago, and we did a tandem exercise. So Chris and I sat down with their existing values statement and mapped it to the 21 values. And then I went into the organisation and we played the card game. And Saul's very nice. There's my glamorous assistant showing you the 21 cards. We mapped it, we did the exercise using the 21 cards. We then compared our answers. So they didn't know what Chris and I had come up with. Chris and I couldn't foresee what they were going to come up with. But bizarrely, the top 7 matched. The bottom 7 matched exactly. And in the middle set, which we class as the minor motivators, we'd inverted or flipped 2 of them. So the congruence was absolute. So it had come from Chris and I's expertise in terms of what we understand of the model, the organization's understanding of what their values meant to them, and the congruence was phenomenal. As I say, 19 out of the 21 exact match, we flipped 2. but they were actually in that middle banding. So what we're actually looking at is we're giving the organisation, the individual, a way of actually measuring their values rather than it being a subjective, this is what I feel, it's black and white, this is what they say I am.
Rather than just saying we value integrity and honesty.
Exactly.
And quality is our number one. Kind of.
Yeah, Tim, that goes back to my things on the wall. You know,
I know.
We believe integrity is important in our business.
Yeah.
Well, shouldn't every business believe that?
That's right. They're givens. They're givens. Don't be in business if you're not going to have integrity or honesty.
The unfortunate thing is, though, Tim, I have worked for organisations that might say that on the wall but don't deliver.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. But that's the Interact model. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I will show you how the model's put together. So there are 7 major factors. We are recording this. If you want a copy of this afterwards, we'll do it. And I can see some people are making notes. Or if you want to have a chat with Saul and I afterwards, we're more than happy to sort of fill in any of the gaps. But there are 7 basic factors that, as I say, with the research, with everything that's gone on behind this, these are deemed to be significantly important, both for the organisation and the individual. Sat at the top is business ethics, which for me, when I completed the assessment, was my highest value. I have actually left the job, and the guy I was coaching earlier on, it was business ethics that said to him, I cannot continue to work in this business. But there's others. There's things around physical health. There's things around lifestyle stability. You know, lots of people talk about home, work, life balance. What does that actually mean? It means something different for everybody. So lifestyle stability fits in there. Autonomy. Do people want independence or do they want guidance? Where might they sit? Need for growth. Are they somebody who wants to develop, achieve themselves, or want to develop others? You'll see why I say that in a minute. Interaction. Not everybody wants to be interactive. Some people are quite happy. You know, lockdown was massive. I did some, well, it was pro bono stuff because I never got paid for it, but I live in quite a small village, and some of the people around, all of a sudden, from being used to getting on the bus in the morning, going into town and sitting in office for 8 hours and coming home and doing their plan, was devastated because they had to work from home. One of the biggest things was the isolation. That they had no interaction, they had nobody to talk to. Talking to somebody on a phone is not the same as personal. Yeah. As I go back to the words are very, very irrelevant. It's about 10-15% of the communication process. 60% of the communication is about the physiology, the bits that you can see, hear, the body language, the interaction, the facial expressions, and that's just what you're doing face to face, telephone rather. So interaction, and then entrepreneurial is all about how people perceive the risk, etc. So that's how the model makes up. So those 7 factors then have 21 independent facets, looking across a broad sector of people's values and organisational values. So when we played the card game, the bit that my glamorous assistant very kindly held up, those 21 cards reflect the 21 values. Okay, this is a little bit of an exercise. I've got a case study coming up, but just to give me some indication or you a little bit of a practice and a little bit of play with the concept, we'll look at case study. The second one is a little bit more deeper and does include disc profiling, but we've got this. So what I'd like you to do, just for 5 minutes, you'll see there's the 7 factors. You'll see there's the 21 facets. And you'll see there's 2 ladies with what may appear as a similar role. They are both nurses. But one of those nurses is a military nurse, and the other one works on a hospital ward. What I'd like you to do, just for a couple of minutes, is choose the top 3 values that you believe are most appropriate and suitable for each of those roles. So just 3. What 3 do you think are the most important for the military nurse, and the 3 that are most important for the ward sister? Okay, if you want to take yourselves off mute, we'll get some feedback. Any volunteers to go first?
Okay, well, I will.
Yep, go on.
I think for the military nurse, I would say physical health, autonomy, and then I said business ethics, because I think ethics have to come into this line of work in any case, in any event. So I would say those were the top 3 there. Then the hospital ward nurse, I'd say lifestyle stability, interaction, and possibly need for growth, you see, that as well. And then business ethics again.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me.
Yeah, I think I
mean,
got
business ethics is an interesting, because I agree. I think business ethics fits into a lot of different roles, responsibilities. But one of the things I find fascinating with, you know, and it's similar to, I haven't worked with a lot of nurses, but I've done a lot of work with the police. And police officers don't become police officers because of the pay, because of the prospects. They become police officers because they have a real strong belief in doing the right thing, with my interpretation. And I think with nurses, doctors, it's the same thing.
Yeah, not in South Africa in terms of the police, though, I have to say.
Okay.
Other things that drive them. Yeah, like money.
Okay.
Bribery, you know, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've picked for the hospital nurse interaction, and I've got an autonomy, like a freedom of lifestyle, because they work different shifts and they can do it. They can sometimes pick and choose when they want to work. And my granddaughter who lives with us is a nurse. And then the ability utilization, you know, wanting to learn more all the time. But the military nurse is a bit more difficult. I mean, you could apply the same things, but I guess there's some, when you say autonomy, they would have some requirement to, you know, to acquiesce to authority, to have authority over them. If you're going to be in the military, you've got to be ready to be told what to do.
Yeah, but they may need to be more, you know, if you look at the actual facets within autonomy, they may be more creative. You know, they be in a situation where they have very limited kit.
Yes, that's true.
Limited resources, so they have to be more creative. They have to think outside the box. It's a variety, you know, they may be dropped into a war zone where there's no stability whatsoever.
Yeah.
They just have to do their own thing. They have to be independent thinkers. Perhaps try, I mean, I'm not medically trained, but they might have to try something that, you know, in a hospital they wouldn't do because the risk would be great. But if you're in a battlefield and you're in a war zone and it's life or death, they may take a very different approach to what they do to save that person's life. The autonomy as a factor may be built up of a different mix. And that's where you get this lovely blend of, you know, it's not as simple as just looking at 7 factors, 21 values. Likewise with DISC, for people who are familiar with DISC theory, you know, you can get 2D profiles, they're chalk and cheese. They just happen to be quite direct, forceful and competitive. But everything else about them is they do things in a very different way. But yeah, and that's where you get the blend of autonomy. It may be around the creativity, it may be around the independence and the variety of just saying, you know, I will do whatever I have to do to save this person's life.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, but within the realm of business ethics, so there is that overdriver again that's saying, you know, ethically I believe it's correct, but I will be a little bit more flexible. You know, there probably isn't as stringent a health and safety regime when you're a nurse out in the field than you are when you're a nurse in a hospital in the UK or wherever it might be. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. It is tough. The fascinating thing is, if I said, you know, what do you believe the drive values are for a nurse, you may well get a very similar set of answers. But it's the environment that nurse is put into that makes the difference. Sarah, what were your thoughts?
I went down the same path as Tim. I didn't put autonomy for the military nurse because working in a defence business, I know that our people can't cope with autonomy. They need to be told what to do, otherwise they don't take action at all. So I dropped autonomy and went more towards interaction, because communication is key in those kind of environments, and being able to give and receive orders, I think, is quite important.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
other than that, I'd say a match with what Moira said before on the ward nurse. Completely matched the list there.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. And you know, there are some similarities. So I guess they both have the similar relationships. The army are a very close-knit community, as are hospital wards. You know, they worked very well as a team. I don't know, again, with South Africa and Australia, but we have loads of these programs on the UK at the minute, sort of a spy on the wall sort of cameras looking in at emergency ward 10 or whatever it might be, inside the ambulance and all sorts of things we have. But the common theme is they all have this really good bond and work together. They have a really strong team bond, which I find quite fascinating. I watch those programs not so much for the gory detail, but the people interactions. I just find it fascinating. And you know, when they have patients and things, they have such a empathetic way of getting to understand what those people are, or who those people are, should I say? But no, good. Okay, so that's just a very quick sort of round robin in terms of how we can use the model to look at a different role. Go back to the situation. So what I would do in the recruitment situation, I would sit down with the organization, we'd look at those 21 values, and we would create a value set that says these are, the way the algorithms work in the system, they create 3 groups of 7. So they'll create 7 major motivators, which are the unnegotiables. And they'll set 7 potential demotivators, again, which are the non-negotiables, but for a different reason. If they're impacted, then it's going to disengage the individual very, very quickly. And then the 7 sat in the middle. We talked earlier about sort of trainability around DISC behaviours are relatively easy to train, modifying behaviour. A lot of people, if they have reasonable levels of self-awareness, can modify their own behaviour with no training. They can behave in different ways to different situations. Here we would look, if we were going to do any training at all, or if we needed to do any modification, it would be those 7 in the middle that would be the area that we would focus on, because they're easier to influence in that sense. Good. Okay, we shall move on. Case study number 2. And this is where I just needed to make sure people were familiar with DISC, because I do apologize. We have some DISC profiles here. I'm just trying to get people out of the way. Oh, that's better. Okay, so this is a situation. This is a conflict resolution within a team. We have 2 supervisors, Supervisor A and Supervisor B. They manage between them a team of about 30 on the shift process. And there is a boss, obviously a director. Some of the issues that we came up with are around lack of communication, lack of responding to emails, very little sharing of information. Supervisor A and Supervisor B were found on numerous occasions physically arguing in open areas. Their teams were splitting into silos. Quality and production was both having issues. There was error rates increasing. There had been a number of key members of staff say they were actively looking to leave, and equally absenteeism was going up. And there was an issue around customer complaints, etc., etc., etc. So when we look at that, when we look at these 2 profiles, if we look at Supervisor A, we're looking at somebody with high steadiness. They're thorough, they're reliable, they're dependable, they're persistent, they have good listening skills, they're kind, motivated by security, and they would fear insecure situations. There's nothing really there that would highlight the issues that I've just explained on earlier on. If we look at Supervisor B, they also have steadiness, but now influence creeps in. So in addition to all the organisation and thorough kindness, we have people skills. So verbally communicative, quite a positive, glass half full rather than half empty, motivated by recognition, so likes to be liked, working with and through people. And then we look at the director, and the director is a CD profile. Process, rules, systems, there's a right way, there's a wrong way, detail, perfectionist, but also some drive, some dominance, some competitiveness, motivated by power and authority, fear of failure. So you could see where there was a potential disconnect between the 2 supervisors and the director, but not so much between the individual 2 supervisors. Anybody, any thoughts on how that team dynamic might work, or where the issues may arise? Between Supervisor A and B, I'm saying there is an obvious conflict between the director, but what sort of things would you be looking at between A and B?
Paul, if I can come in there, I would look at the C factor for both of them. I mean, it's a, drop down. Yeah. So yeah. They're both extremely independent in terms of their probably processes. And obviously, if we talk about compliance, both completely non-compliant to a degree.
Yeah, so they'll a bit of a rebel or maverick even.
Yeah, exactly. They'll want to do things their own way, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so they have that, but they share that in common. So you're going to get that, you're quite right, Maura, you're going to get clash of, well, I want to do it this way. No, I do it that way.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And with the high S, you're going to get the persistent squared. So you're going to get these people really digging in their heels and not wanting to move. And then you've got the boss in the middle that says, well, we're doing it this way because this is the right way.
Yeah. That's my way or yeah, exactly. Or no way.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other observations? Okay, but yeah.
Well, the director hasn't got much influencing skills, so he's not actually being able to talk to them. It doesn't appear he can probably talk to them about some of these issues as well. He's just laying it down, saying that's it, and not actually listening to some of the issues and trying to find ways to resolve it, possibly.
Correct.
Yeah.
You look at
Yeah.
Sorry, Monica.
Yeah, I was going to say with that high D, he's not really listening at all or trying to influence. He's just telling them this is the way it will be, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the predominance of the C, he's probably telling them via email.
Correct. Correct.
Because the C's preference is to write things down. It's documented. It's there. It's in black and white. This is what we want you to do, and this is how we want you to do it. And both supervisors are good listeners. They both have good listening skills.
Correct.
So there is a definite disconnect in terms of communication. And a lot of those issues that I mentioned are around communication. You know, not sharing team information, arguing, disagreements, lack of communication, etc., 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 not responding to emails. Yeah. High S's will have a priority of doing things in a correct order. So I work with quite a lot of high S's, as most people, because it's a predominant profile. And they will have put a process in place. So one of the ladies I worked with, on her out of office, she has an out of office permanently on her email that says, I read my emails between 4:30 and 5 o'clock every day. Surprised if I don't respond until the following day, but I will respond.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want to be distracted. So that is her permanent out of office. Well, I guess when she goes on holiday, she changes it, but her normal everyday out of office is, I read my emails between 4:30 and 5 o'clock every day. Please don't worry if I don't respond immediately. And it's a lovely place to be. I don't think I could get away with it, but for her, it works. And I've known her for 3 years. She was one of my first ever contacts when I set the business up, and it's never changed. And she says it works for her. Okay, so let's introduce values now. So we did the values, we did the PVP. We don't have a CVP, so that doesn't exist. So we haven't got anything that looks at the corporate values, but we did run the PVP. We did look at the personal values. We look at supervisor A, and they have concern for others as their number one motivator and value. They have close relationships and they have personal development. Now, what's interesting, we're already starting to get a mix. So we've got somebody with I below the line, but they really value close relationships. The motivator for an S is security. Sorry, Maureen, I saw your finger go up there. Have you got a question? No? Okay. So we've got, people often confuse I and S. They think, you know, S is about steadiness, S is about pace, which it is, but they're also friendly, lovely people. They like the security that relationships give them. One of the, if we are looking in terms of observable behaviors, if you see a family picture of on a desk or on the back of a wall in somebody's office, think S. Because the family gives them security. A team gives them security. So they really value close relationships. It's important to them. And that's where you see values starting to drive behavior, or vice versa. So there's their three values. Their top three: concern for others. It's important that they don't upset anybody. An S. Nice, kind, reliable, dependable, all the S traits. They love close relationships because it gives them security. It gives them somebody to bounce their ideas off. It equally mitigates blame, because in a really good team, you're not going to get a blame culture. It's not their fault. It's not my fault. It's not our, it's a collective. We've messed up. We need to sort it out. And then personal development, they want to do their best they can. You look at the director, they equally have a concern for others, but where does that come from? I would need to have a conversation with this person just to understand where their concern for others comes from. They like close relationships and they believe in business ethics. Not so clear in terms of how that drives their behavior. We would have a conversation. It may be they are the youngest child, which, interestingly enough, the person I was talking earlier was a DC profile. Youngest children are invariably more competitive.
I must be the anomaly. I'm the youngest of four boys.
Right.
And I'm an S.
You're an S.
Dominant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's well, and that's what I said. You know, there is nothing. Everybody is different. Everybody is different. But it is fascinating to try and understand and unpick. You know, when we're coaching, there's a lot around questionings to understand where these drivers have come from and how it all fits together. And that slide I had earlier on, which is the sort of networking slide of joining all the dots together. And if you've got a dozen dots around a wheel, they may be joined in a very different way. The interactions and relationships can be different. But we look at the director, 3 of their main motivators, or their top 3: concern for others, which is similar to supervisor A; close relationships, which is similar to supervisor A; and then business ethics. We then look at supervisor B. They're 3. Independence. Moira, you picked up on that S over C. Independent style. That's their number 1 driver. Now, we're not saying for supervisor A that isn't their 4th or 5th, but it's not their top 3. Freedom of lifestyle. Again, S over C. Independence. Wants to do things their way. And then finally, business ethics. So we looked at these 2 individuals and we took certain actions. The first thing we did was we put all 3 of them around the table and got them talking with each other. We had a group meeting. We discussed the results of both their DISC profile and their values profile. And we agreed as a collective that we looked at creating a CVP, a corporate values for the 3 of them. So we played the card game with the 3 of them to look at what the overall profile should look like around the 21 values. And then we did a gap analysis and we saw where the biggest gaps were. And we agreed an action plan where they could work together to see where some individuals have strengths and other people have potential limitations, and to fill some of those gaps. We then created a communication process and actually documented it and said, this is how this team is going to communicate. This is what we expect from each of the individuals. And we also agreed on how anybody coming into that team would be onboarded and go through a very similar process. So, you know, when we look at recruitment, often people think the recruitment process ends when you appoint the person. For me, that's only part of the process, because it's how you onboard them and how you integrate them and how you introduce them into the team. And you go through the whole bit about their induction, their onboarding, their probationary period. No, the recruitment process doesn't actually end until their probation's finished, in my head. So a lot more elongated process, and perhaps a lot of people will sort of come through.
So by using the analysis or the data there, when you're getting these people together, you're taking some of the emotional, he said, she said, you know, thing out of it. You're starting with a data-driven base.
Definitely.
That they can recognise rather than just, you know, hearsay and what they perceive as people's values or weaknesses and strengths.
Definitely. I mean, we do some work around conflict resolution or having what I call necessary conversations. A lot of people call them having difficult conversations. And one of the key facts when you're having to have a necessary conversation or you're looking at conflict resolution, you have to remove the element of feelings.
Yeah.
And you have to remove the element of subjectivity, and you have to look at fact, and you have to look at the evidence and the detail. Definitely. And that's in reality what we're being allowed to do here. So we've removed the emotional element. We've removed the subjectivity element of it. You know, the he said, she said bit.
Yeah.
All that's gone. We're looking at data. We're looking at facts. And I often say to people when I'm giving, you know, I can't tell you whether a disc profile is right or wrong. I will only know that after I've given you feedback and had a conversation, and you've validated what I see in front of me. Fully say I trust the profiles more than I trust the candidates sometimes, because I've been doing it for so long that I do believe that the values of the systems and people have varying degrees of self-awareness. And I'm sure, Moira, you come across it, that people that have that profile S over C say they're not stubborn.
Exactly.
And 20 minutes after a discussion saying, well, I think you might be. No, I'm not stubborn. Are you determined? Yes, I'm very determined. Are you independent? Yes, I'm very independent. Are you a little bit stubborn? No, I'm not stubborn. I've had that conversation hundreds of times. So that's what we did. We looked at the onboarding system. We looked at the leadership skills. The outcomes, interestingly enough, Supervisor B actually decided to leave. But Supervisor A was a major part in terms of the cog, in terms of implementing the cultural change that the organisation did. And equally, Supervisor A became more focused on the results, even though their lowest factor was the D. They saw the importance of how important it was to get this congruence, to get all their dots in a row and to join them all together and get an aligned, structured process into the business. And that was it. The process worked. Yes, there was a casualty, Supervisor B left. But that again is the reality of the world. You know, you can handle that in a very positive way and say, look, you don't fit with our business at the moment, but you will find somewhere else that you do fit in with. Everybody has a round peg in a round hole. We just need to help them find it. So that's the case study. Any observations, thoughts in terms of how that's sort of gone through? Does it make sense? Is it a logical sort of process to follow?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So this is really where we're sort of mopping up and coming to the end. But for me, like I said, everything has to interconnect. There has to be connections joining all the dots together. And that for me is where the value, you know, if you're an organization that only uses DISC, you're significantly better than a company that doesn't use anything. Yeah, because DISC is a really useful, valuable tool, but it doesn't give you all the answers. Yeah, and my years selling assessments, you'd say, okay, have you thought of using an ability assessment? Have you thought of using emotional intelligence? And they'd turn around to me, Paul, you're just trying to sell us stuff. You're a salesman, you're trying to sell us stuff. I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm trying to make your processes more robust, because DISC will give you a certain amount of information. Bolting on ability assessments will give you another ability. I describe it a little bit like if you think of a cake, you know, and you've got 10 segments in a cake. Each process, each assessment, you've got a CV. A CV is one segment. How much emphasis you put on that CV is up to you. I actually don't put a lot of weighting on a CV because I think it's fictional most of the time. But that's just me being very cynical. You've then got things like an interview. You've got what I used to call, when I was retailing, a day in a shop. So anybody I was recruiting into the retail business, I would pay them, but they would spend a day or half a day, at least half a day, working in the store. And then I would go back to the store manager and the staff and say, what did you think of that person? How did they get on? And that would be part of my recruitment process. Not technical, but it was just what I did. And it was really useful for me to get the other employees, that, you know, the people that they were going to work with, their feedback, because they saw it from a different, very completely different angle to the way I saw things. So we do that, working practice. But then you bolt in things like emotional intelligence and values, and you start to get a lot more of those segments filled up. So that's what I'm not trying to sell it. I just think from a holistic point of view, the more information you can gather on person. I did a few years ago, I worked with an insolvency practitioner. And I said, you know, you look around a lot about making sure that the business is there, you know, your due diligence. You go into an organization and you look at the numbers, you look at the facts. How do you measure the people? How do you do due diligence on the people? And he said, well, we don't get involved with the people. I said, but surely everybody says people are the business. You know, most organizations, it's the people in the business that actually make the business as successful or otherwise as it is. And he said, well, it would be really interesting to do due diligence on the individuals, but how would I do it? And then we put together a program of assessments that actually enabled him to do it. And the results were unbelievable. You could find companies where 2 or 3 influencers were significantly impacting on the performance of a business, massively. So that's the sort of thing that I play with and look at. But yeah, it's about getting all your dots joined together, and that's it. That's the session. I'm happy to take questions. Saul's happy to take questions. About values, about behaviours, or about anything else that we can help you with in terms of what you would like answers to. So unmute yourselves and feel free to chat.
It's gone very quiet.
I'll ask the question because I'm coming from this in a completely different way. I've only taken one little bit of in my course. I do a section on values. So this is an activity for the manager or the owner to actually do, to work out their own values, to actually define them, not in a prescribed way where you've got it there so that it gives a graph and, you know, emphasis on different kinds of values, but it actually defines in their words what their values are. And then they actually present this to their staff. So they're really sort of becoming vulnerable and saying, this is who I am or these are my, and they can break it down into either leadership values or personal values, but they specifically define them, like as in, you know, I value honesty in the workplace and believe there is no situation or incident that requires covering up. So it actually spells out exactly an instance. You know, this is my value and this is why.
Yeah.
I'm not a professional HR person. I just came up with these sort of concepts based on, you know, some research. Just wanted to get your thoughts on, is that a good thing or not? Is going to that level going to be of any benefit? Or is
I think without a shadow of a doubt. I think the more you challenge an individual to think about themselves is an absolute winner. Absolutely. But the difficulty, you often find people find it very hard to articulate.
Yes.
So that you know, you'll struggle to, you'll say, okay, I do it. If you're looking at a sales team and say, what makes your top salesperson the top salesperson? And they struggle to articulate what actually makes that person the best person. Yeah. When you look at somebody's personal values, it is very difficult. Yeah, and that's where self-awareness and the training that we do is so beneficial, because we give people a common language.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, DISC gives you a common language. You can be a D, and you can be driving, you can be forceful, and you can be competitive. You can be a high S, and you can be thorough, you can be reliable, you're a good listener, you're a lovely person, because you're a high S.
Yeah.
And we give you that common language. And I think what, you know, if you ask people to sit down, I do the same. And, you know, when you read a lot of leadership books and all those, they will all have an element of, it is important to understand your values, because values determine who you are. They are your compass.
Yeah.
Difficult.
And if you don't know who you are, how are you expecting your staff and employees to know what they have to live up to, or what you have to live up to in their eyes, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Because again, you go back to the Lencioni stuff and building teams and building successful teams. Teams are all around trust. And if you've got a team leader that opens up to them and tells them, this is who I am, this is what my beliefs are, this is what my values are, that will build trust.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, 100% think that is a brilliant exercise to do. And I do it in a team, but so I'll do it when I'm doing a team building day, like I described earlier on, and I will always start with the team leader. So I will always ask them to go first, but then I go around the table and ask everybody else.
Yeah. Good.
I'm the opposite of that, Paul. I hate to say it, but I'm a complete opposite. I mean, that's why I like what we do with regarding the personal values and the corporate values, is what you say, the common language. I remember sitting down in a group in a team session where we started to discuss our own personal values, and my mind went completely blank, because I had absolutely no idea when I was trying to think what were my personal values. I couldn't even think what would be values. I mean, I'm going back several years ago, quite a while ago, and that's why I think with the cards and obviously with the assessment, whatever, it brings that ease of thinking about actually what is it that's really important.
Yeah.
And there's
I like that. I like the idea of the cards.
Yeah. One of the interesting factors that I've found, particularly with regarding the values side of things, is my profile on the DISC side of things has a very low S. And we talk about motivators on a high S being security, stability, that type of thing. On my values, that is actually really quite important to me. So my DISC profile is saying one thing, but my values are saying something slightly different, because that actually gets into the deeper root of what I am and who I am and what I stand for. My motivators regarding work-wise can be slightly different, but underneath, like stability, loyalty, security, yeah, it was incredibly important, but my DISC profile didn't tell you that. So I think, so for me, when it comes to a group session doing and just saying to somebody, right, I want you to write a list of your values, you're going to get integrity, honesty, trust, collaboration.
No.
And now at the moment,
I'd rather lead them.
And now at the moment, everybody's saying
they have a process.
Authentic.
They have a process, and you give them a process to actually work it out through over a week or so. They do it individually and go through.
I'd have gone back and I would have Googled it quickly on my phone underneath the table, the desk, quickly. Right, I think that looks good. That sounds good. And come up with what I think might sound be the right thing to say. But I mean, I'm going back a few years ago, obviously. Maybe 3.
Exactly. No, I understand what you're saying. I wouldn't do that. But,
Tim, there's a book by a guy called Michael Heppel that's called How to Be Brilliant.
Okay.
And he very similar process on one of the factors. It's all about understanding your personal values and what makes you you. Yeah.
Okay. That'd be brilliant. Good. I'll look that one up. Yeah.
And that's what's great about the corporate values. The corporate values profile can do a team, can do a department, can do a group of people. It can do the company, and then you can benchmark your individuals against those. And then that's where you can say, because one of the really hard parts is when people talk about trying to identify personal values, and then they're trying to align those values with the corporate values, which were probably it's probably the senior leadership team that probably came up with those corporate values, and are probably nice to have, but not actually what they do have. So, in fact, I had somebody on the other day that was saying that their senior leadership team had come up with their core values. And then she said, actually admitted, well, it actually wasn't senior leadership, it was the CEO. He decided what they were.
Yeah.
Okay, right, okay.
And he probably Googled them, yeah.
Yeah. I think they were like customer focus, honesty.
Yeah.
No, actually, to tell you the truth, they were three. There was three of them. And what was interesting about them was they then have to define what those mean. So somebody else has to define what his values were. And the three values that he came up with were boldness, togetherness, which basically collaboration, whatever, and authenticity. So that somebody else has to actually go and define those. So he's just come up with these.
Yeah.
So different things for different people, I suppose.
Yes, definitely.
Sorry.
Well, that has been a very interesting session, actually. I mean, I've got as I say, I've looked through some of the books and stuff, but this has sort of brought it together. It's been good.
Good. Okay, glad you enjoyed it. Sorry, we're lacking in delegates. We'll have to go and find them because they'll be in the ether somewhere.
Something went wrong with that link. That's all it will have been.
Yeah, I don't get it. Yeah.
I had an issue with the last one.
I emailed you the same link and it worked. Bizarre.
Yeah.
Maybe try the LinkedIn events. LinkedIn does events now. You can actually do this stuff on LinkedIn via events rather than using the Eventbrite.
Yeah, well, that's what we do. We do it on both, Tim. So we do it on LinkedIn and we do Eventbrite. The difficulty is trying to join the two together.
Right.
So Chris manages our Eventbrite page, and I think we had 7 or 8 delegates on there. I managed the LinkedIn page, and we had 7 or 8 delegates on there.
Right.
Okay.
It's joining the two together that seems to be the issue. But this is something slightly different because the link that's on the site, Saul couldn't log in. It was asking him for a password. Yeah. So I emailed him the same login that I'd logged in on, which theoretically should have been the same one that was on Eventbrite, and he went straight in. No password required. So, days where we just used to get people in a room and have a chat was a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think LinkedIn and Eventbrite need to get their values aligned.
Yeah, the 20-hour flight is a bit of a deterrent.
That's all right. We'll come over to you
every now and again. But good. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you do have any questions, then feel free to get in touch. We're both on LinkedIn. We can bob you our contact details or whatever else. So please do keep in touch. And if you think of, a lot of people that I work with in terms of their reflective style, they'll come off a call like this and think in an hour or two, oh, I wish I'd asked that question. Just drop us an email and we'll square it away.
Yeah. So you're all happy for me to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Very.
Perfect. Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Oh, you have a good day.
Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Enjoy your red wine.
Thank you.
I have to do a day's work before I can get my red wine now.
Yeah. Nearly finished now. I've just got the last little bit.
Ready for a refill.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
That was the bottle, not the glass.
Yeah. Do you just want to stop the recording?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
You're getting carried away.